Rangers, the 2017 No One Gives a Shit edition, is rated PG-13 for sequences of sci-fi violence, action and destruction, language, and some crude dialogue. It is directed by Dean Israelite on a script written by John Gattens, Mark Sazasma, Burke Sharpless, Kieran Mulroney, and Michelle Mulroney, and is about these heroes called the Power Rangers, these 5 teenagers that are outcasts in society and outcasts at their school, stumble upon these 5 power coins in a gold mine, and they come across this spaceship, and they learn that they are now a new generation of what was once called the Power Rangers, and they have to stop Rita Repulsa from her evil schemes, because she's evil, and monsters, and money. We can just throw money at the screen. One part of me was excited about this movie. Obviously, I grew up with the Power Rangers. I think the TV show aired in 95. I was only 1 at the time. The 1997 Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie was a staple in my household. I saw a couple episodes of the show, but that was like what I watched when I watched Power Rangers. Even as a kid, I knew that movie sucked and it wasn't good. But hey, the monsters exploded into purple goo. That was fun with and within itself. I wasn't excited for this movie, and the trailers really gave me a mixed vibe. I was like, that could either be really good or really bad. And the reviews were kind of tearing it apart. They're like, it's not a good movie. And for the majority of this movie, I will say this, for the majority of this movie, I wasn't like having a blast with the movie, but for a majority of this movie, I was having a good time. I was like, this is actually a fairly enjoyable movie, and it's the first 2/3 of the movie. For one, the Power Rangers themselves, the actors and the characters are actually pretty solid. The actors, you needed really good actors to sell you on the fact that these were teenage superheroes. I think it was cast pretty well. Naomi Scott as Kimberly, Dacre Montgomery, I think I'm saying that right, as Jason, who's the leader. R.J. Seiler, Ludi Lin, and Becky G all did really good as the Power Rangers, and their characters actually were a bit fleshed out. There's this one scene in the movie towards the middle where they kind of go around, they talk about like their past troubles and all that, and why they were in detention and all that, but I mean, before that, it's really kind of nothing. I mean, you get a little bit of Kimberly, the Pink Ranger, that's Naomi Scott. You get a little bit of her backstory, you get a little bit of Jason's backstory, you get a little bit of the Blue Ranger's backstory, who happens to be named Billy, but you really don't get much backstory from the Black Ranger and the Yellow Ranger up until that scene in the movie. The scene in the movie really kind of gave you a backstory and a little bit more depth into who the Black Ranger and the Yellow Ranger were. Actors really gave a bad performance. Becky G was probably the weakest link, but even she wasn't terrible. I think if you're going to pinpoint people's careers who's going to take off after this movie, it's going to be the lead dude, R.J. Seiler, who's the Blue Ranger, and Naomi Scott as the Pink Ranger, Kimberly. I think they're going places after this. And by the first 2/3 of the movie, I mean, you have all the build-up, it's the origin story, you get a couple of origin story cliches in there, sure, but it's not terrible. I mean, you're watching it and you're like, this is actually, I've seen it all a million times before, but it's actually, pretty impressive, it's pretty good. This is actually leading up to be a really cool Power Rangers movie. And then the second act of the movie is actually them trying to morph, be the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, trying to morph, and they come across their Zords, and you're like, that's cool, you got the Zords. That's awesome. Nothing really all that actiony goes down in the first 2 acts of this movie, which I was fine with. I was like, you don't need a gigantic action scene in the middle of this movie to be like, oh, now they're the Power Rangers. You don't need that. You could have saved that for the end, which they did. But it was the second act of the movie where Elizabeth Banks as Rita Repulsa showed up, and I was just like, I don't really like where this is going. I mean, she's definitely the weakest part of the movie, and Elizabeth Banks is just a cartoon copy of herself in this movie, but I was like, I've definitely seen a lot worse. That should have been the first sign. Because like I said, the first 2 acts of this movie are fairly enjoyable. They're very watchable, they're entertaining. It's not good or great by any means, but it's not terrible. The 3rd act of this movie, dead on arrival. I'm going to mention a plot device here. It's not really a spoiler, but the first 2/3 of this movie are really enjoyable. Up until the point where a Krispy Kreme donut shop becomes a plot device. From there on, the movie's bad. It sucks. And it really made me look at the first 2/3 of this movie and was like, was that even all that good? What I said about the first 2/3 of this movie, and I'm sorry if I keep repeating myself, but they were enjoyable. It's the third act of the movie that totally kills the movie. It completely falls apart here. I don't know how. It did. There's a lot to talk about with this third act, and it's really making me think about this movie in ways that I didn't think I would think about it. Three main problems with this movie, and two of them show up in the third act of the movie. The first problem I have with this movie: what is this movie's target audience? Is it kids? Is it teenagers? Is it young adults? Is it people like me, like my generation that grew up with the Power Rangers? Is it the millennials? Who knows? The first two acts of this movie are, I don't want to say are dark and gritty. I mean, gritty you could probably use to describe, but it's like serious where it has its funny, touching moments throughout. And then the third act of the movie turns into everything the Power Rangers are, and it's really just a change in conflict and tone. It was weird. It was just super cheesy and bad and just like, not entertaining at all. If it was bad and entertaining in a good way, this movie would have been fine, but that third act was not anything like that. I knew the third act was going to be all action-packed, and I was like, if it's the guilty pleasure, cheesy, goofy type of fun that the TV show and parts of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie from 1997 presented, I'll be happy. No, it wasn't that. It was almost like the target audience was like my generation and young adults for the first 2/3 of this movie, and then the movie just catered to little kids at the end. I was like, no, because they get their Zords and they're riding around in their Zords, and I'm like, these are just in the movie so that little kids can go and buy action figures. Good job, movie. I already kind of mentioned, and that is the tone. There is a huge conflicting tone in this movie. How do you go from what you had in a serious, realistic, kind of humorous but also gritty type of film to just something that's so cheesy and dull and just bad and goofy in a bad way, like not the guilty pleasure type of way. Like, you should have just made this a really guilty pleasure, goofy, cheesy, actiony Power Rangers movie that everybody probably wanted to see. If that were the case, I would have seen that, as long as that was the whole movie. If you're going for the dark, serious, realistic type of tone, go for that the whole fucking movie! Don't put extravagant action scenes filled with terrible dialogue, giant-ass, shitty-looking monsters, and Zords, and shit, and Krispy Kreme donuts because you want kids to buy your donuts and toys that look like the Dinobots from Transformers 4. I can't believe I'm even bringing that movie up in this review, but that's what it felt like. The entire third act of this movie is the entirety of Batman and Robin, and that is, it's a giant toy commercial. It's a toy commercial for kids. That's what it is. Sure, you'll want to see the Power Rangers kick ass in the third act, but you know what? I don't even think they kicked any ass, because the action in this movie... We gotta talk about the action scenes, because those were not good. Enormous action scene in the third act looks so sloppy. They do this whole slow motion, fast motion technique, you know, what I call slow fast mo. It's a technique that's been, like, outdated for, like, 10 years now. Like, one movie did it. 300. And then everybody started to do it, and I was like, guys, it's not cool anymore. It worked for one movie. It's definitely not cool anymore. Don't do it. To make your movie look even shittier than it already is, and it's a lazy editing technique. I don't like it. The Power Rangers fight giant rock monsters, and a giant monster that's like 900 feet tall made of gold. In their Zords, and then somehow they get their Megazord? No sense in this movie. First of all, how do they know how to work these things, okay? They tried it once, they failed. They didn't even try, actually. When they're training, they don't even try to pilot or fly or whatever the hell they do with these Zords. They don't even try them out. And then in the third act, they're like, let's go get the Zords, and all of a sudden they can, like, maneuver and pilot them? Like, how? We didn't even see that. Come on! CGI on this gold monster piece of shit thing was awful. I was like, this is just a giant poop monster that's pooping gold. Just keep knocking Rita Repulsa down, and then the hands like reaching down to like pick her up, and she's like floating in like the gold, and I'm like, this looks so sloppy. I'm like, what was the budget for this movie? I thought this was a big budget Power Rangers movie. What the hell happened? I was upset because they were fighting giant rock monsters and none of them exploded into purple goo. That would have been more exciting. Did I mention that they play the Power Rangers theme while this big action scene is going down? It was so completely out of place, okay? If you're gonna play this, go Power Rangers! Yeah, save that for the end credits so we actually have something good to walk out to. They integrated Krispy Kreme into this movie, and the moment that Rita Repulsa walks into a Krispy Kreme in the middle of the fucking battle and eats a fucking donut, I was like, this movie sucks. Speaking of Krispy Kreme, oh my god, the product placement. How much money was spent for product placement? I counted at least one Dodge Caravan, which is ironic because the characters in this movie get hit in a Dodge Caravan. So I'm like, yeah, they didn't dodge that one, did they? Krispy Kreme, Dodge, Tony Stark's Iron Man suits that somehow are now Power Ranger suits. It's all there, guys. It's all product placement. And it's super annoying. Shame that this Power Rangers movie turned out this way, because like I said, and I gotta keep repeating it, I was enjoying what I was seeing for the first 2/3 of this movie. I was like, oh my god, this is actually a solid Power Rangers movie, probably as good as you can get. And then that third act happened, and it killed the entire thing. It became just such a bad, dull, stupid movie, and it really made me not like this movie. I am going to give Power Rangers the No One Gives a Flying Fuck Edition a 4.2 out of 10. Another unnecessary reboot in a long line of TV shows that have been unpopular for about 20 years now. And one of those happens to be the Power Rangers. When was the last time this was popular? No idea. Like 1991, probably. And it came out in 95. Yeah, 1991 is when this was popular. Before it even came out. Guys, did you see Power Rangers? If you did, I feel your pain. I don't know, I feel like a lot of people are probably going to like this. I mean, the third act just killed it for me. I'm sorry. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. If you're on YouTube, hit our logo at the end of this video and go insane with the Mad Guys. I'm done talking about Power Rangers. It's definitely not, I was going to say it's Morphin' Time, but it's definitely not Morphin' Time.